Hello everyone. We're here to talk about headspace, music, and how caring for people affects you when you're creative. I've got experience of that because I cared for my father as well as having to work in TV and radio at the same time. Mim's a carer. You still have to do that every day, don't you? Yeah, that's kind of part of his role as well as being a DJ. And Naomi works in mental health and well-being. So first, Mim, I just wanted to ask you, how long have you actually been caring for your mum?
So I think since I was born, I've had to get used to understanding what it actually means to be a carer. And then when I actually realised what being a young carer actually is, it meant that it meant way more to me than it did before. I didn't really understand what pressure or what that title actually meant, because the roles were kind of reversed in the sense of a mother caring for a son, whereas it was a son caring for a mother later down in life. So I think from the ages, it was quite late actually, it was about 20 to 21 where I started realising, because I didn't really understand the ongoing mental health difficulties that my mum actually suffered from.
And then so you grew up having to do it, and with the family, you have got family support, haven't you? Mm-hmm. But then in terms of as you got older and you wanted to pursue your own career, how did you manage to juggle looking after your mum and then actually being able to develop your own skills as a DJ?
I think when I was really younger, I just kind of ignored the situation because I didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't know what mental health was. I didn't understand how different people's minds work in a different way and why that is. So by ignoring it, it just allowed me to just tunnel vision and just focus all my energy into my career and just wanting to work so that my dreams and my ambitions and my goals are all achieved in a way. And I think it was a way to kind of, looking back now on it, I think I was actually ignoring the issue and trying to escape from what if I really go down that path and really dissect what is going on. I think it might bring up some things that I might not actually like.
And the one thing that when you are caring for someone, which I kind of did at an older age than you, is that you're told to care for yourself, and you don't quite understand what that means when someone says to take care of yourself, because if you don't, you're not able to look after the person well, but also you're not able to do what you need to do as a creative because it's just not a 9 to 5. So at what age did you realise about self-care?
Quite late as well. If you would have asked me when I was young what self-care is, I wouldn't have been able to answer. But then later on in life, you understand that the more you're doing for other people, you can really get lost in giving everything to everyone else and not really taking time for yourself. So now everybody that talks about self-care and wanting to put yourself before others sometimes, I think it's important, but it's also, you don't want to get too lost into that so much. So I'm not doing that because it's self-care week, you know? Because then how are you really going to be able to love and give those people like affection and really be there for them?
Now one thing that is, when you are looking for somebody culturally, it's really quite difficult because what the services are available to people who are Asian, African, Caribbean aren't necessarily tailor-made to your family member. And I wanted to ask Naomi about that because it's really difficult as you're struggling to kind of make that person happy. It also takes a lot of energy. So what solutions are out there? But first ask about solutions. What problems do you find that people face culturally?
I think there's a wide range of problems. Personally, my grandma had mental health problems. She's Caribbean. We didn't talk about it growing up in our family, so the stigma and the shame attached to opening up about the realities of what it's like living day to day with a mental health problem. I think that there's cultures sort of like, sometimes we can put this sweeping statement around what different cultures respond in different ways, and it's not really always helpful. But I think consistently when people aren't able to access support, whether that's from family and friends, it's because they don't want to speak about the problem, and they often want to bury the problem, and they often want to hide the problem. for me, I'm Tanzanian and I'm African and I'm Caribbean, and I was told you don't talk about your problems to other people. So the fact that other people might know about my vulnerabilities, and it comes up quite a lot in therapeutic rooms, you know, people will share in a safe space, but actually they won't go and talk to their partners, they won't go and talk to their family members and friends. And often the roles put upon yourselves, whether you're a mother, whether you're a father, and gender roles play a role in sort of how people can access support. So culture plays a big role in initially accessing support, and then when you do access support, being able to understand someone's background, being able to understand their experiences, whether that's their experiences of sort of oppression or discrimination or racism that can really impact people's psychological well-being. If in a therapeutic room that doesn't come up, or if in a therapy session, or you know, it's not expressed, then that can sort of exacerbate a problem. So I think, yeah, there's some things.
And I think culturally it's quite important to understand that I'm Pakistani, so I come from an Asian background, and just since you are entered into this world and you are around family members that do not understand the practicalities and the effects of what psychological impact can have on a human being, if they're not trained to understand that or even have some form of empathy with it, and they literally push everything under the carpet, under the carpet, under the carpet. And if your personality is one that is not introverted and is very extroverted, and you're very outer and you need to express to be able to get things off of your mind like I am, you really need to be in an environment that really understands that and helps that. So for me, it was more getting to terms with that, understanding that, so that when I have kids or when I have family of my own, I want them to feel safe in an environment which is easily accessible to talk about things that you can honestly talk about, so that the burden is lifted off you because you're in a very, very, very safe space.
I want to ask you, after we show A Letter to My Mother, how when you recorded this piece of poetry, spoken word, how it was received. You can play that.
That was recorded in January last year, and I haven't seen that since I've made it. And it's like, whoa, because it's like a completely different space to where I am now in comparison to the relationship with my mum, to where I was within 12 months. So even like listening back to that, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, it's making me feel like really emotional, but in a very good way, not in a sad way, because I know at the time there was a lot of things that I needed to say, which was said in that. And I think this is why art is so important, because sometimes that you're not able to really communicate things within society and the world, because you might think what people might say or how they might react. But with art, what you can really do is express honestly and not have to worry about the consequences. Like literally, the amount of feedback that I got from that video about people that really resonated with the subject matter and said, I thought I was the only person that didn't have the best relationship with my mum, and you basically had the ability to articulate exactly how I was feeling. And there was hundreds of them, there wasn't just like one or two, and I thought, wow, we all feel this way, but nobody is talking about it to each other. That is so messed up, because the moment that somebody can go and articulate themselves and talk about it, the moment somebody else will be able to go, oh, I really know how you feel, because I feel the same way about that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's very powerful, and as you say, even if your family members don't want to discuss it, or your friends, there are other people out there who want to share when you put that down. And I was going to ask you about if you are able to reflect on that. Do you have to move on from, do you have to kind of put that away because that was just capturing a moment in time?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's putting it away. I think it's really dealing with your issue. Like, we've all got them, and we all have them on a day-to-day basis, no matter what it is. And if you're an introspective person, you're really able to get down to the bottom of what is really bugging me, or what do I really need to come to grips with and heal within myself for me to be the most fully free human being and individual to fly freely in this world. That was something at the time that was really on my mind, and I wanted to really talk about it and express how I felt about that. Whereas now, that is not an issue on my mind. I mean, I have other issues that I'm getting to terms with, and I'm doing, like I'm making a documentary at the moment about meeting my father. So that's something else. But I think that's why art is so good, to be able to assist you with these things.
Well, it's amazing. I have to point out to Joy, because we had, a couple of months ago, I took a friend into an ice cream parlour, and we were all sharing words and poems, and Joy came up and stood with a singer, and we were all actually, weren't we, sharing words and poetry. We were saying you don't often get in a space and talk, and the person behind the parlour actually said it was the best day of her life, because we were all different ages, all sharing experiences, and I do want you two to meet up. I was telling you do battle raps. So,
you do battle raps?
She does.
The Underdog Play, there's a 10-minute short that got commissioned last year.
Wow.
Get involved. But yeah, those sorts of times are magical when you start talking to strangers randomly and you realise how connected you are, not solving the same together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wondered though, when you express yourself in that way, in terms of family and friends, do they take any notice of the poetry or spoken word that you do?
Yeah, I remember making that, and nobody knew I was making it. I just got on with it and made it, and then just released it and put it out. And then I had a few friends come round to my house, and then my family was there as well. And I made the video, and I literally just played it in front of all of them, and it was like, they were really taken back, because they don't see that side of Mim. You know, they see a different side. But they said that it was really good, it was really well done. But still, this is, I think, which is still a bit problematic, is there was still no conversation moving forward about those things, you know? It was more like, okay, cool, you made that. Well done.
And I was speaking to Naomi before we came in about how, in the work that you do with Chanima, how you use music, because in a way sometimes just singing or delivering poetry is just the only way that sometimes people can express themselves. So how do you find that it works to well-being?
Yeah, I think creativity, art and music is a good way of, like you're seeing just now, facilitating emotion. And what can happen is then people are scared of that emotion and what to do with it. So we work and we run a project called Neuro Champions, where we train up young people in areas of the brain and neuroscience, but we use music, we use exercise, we use connecting with each other to facilitate sort of the knowledge around themselves, but also how they react to their environment as well. And the most, I suppose, the thing that impacts and that allows us to start conversations the most is food and music. It facilitates sort of creating a safe space, creating a family feel, which is what you want to do. If you want to open up, if you want to share and then be able to be supported through sharing, you need to create safe spaces. So within the work we do, we use art, we use creativity, we use music to facilitate that. And I think we might use spoken word, but it's important to see with music, sometimes it's an expression of someone's emotion in that period of time. And that can be pain, and that can be heartbreak, and that can be hurt, and that can transfer. So if you're feeling pain, it can really resonate with you in the same way that if you have a song that expresses joy or expresses happiness, it can lift you up. So the power of music in a short space of time is really beneficial therapeutically for the young people we work with.
And I think it's such a good thing, because you really, it's like a time capsule. I feel like I just went back to a place in my life, and I know exactly where I was at that point. But as you move on, you might forget how you felt about something or an issue 12 to 18 months ago. So this is why I think it's such a great thing to just have as a piece to capture that moment in time.
And how do you deal, you know, outside of music when you have those kind of like low moments? Because also that's, in terms of how the music that you listen to can also kind of affect as well how you are. Particularly if you're creative, you've got to, I suppose, be more aware of what kind of music you surround yourself with. So how do you do that?
As in, how do I get out of, I think music's a great thing to be able to lift yourself out of it. I mean, if I'm having a bad week or whatnot, I always know that I've got my radio shows to look forward to that are going to really lift up my mood and really have a great time of listening to 4 hours of and playing and being able to make people laugh and respond that come in and text and get involved on the show. So I think for me, that's my coping mechanism, or just my way to know that I think we've always got to have something in our minds to look forward to that will get us through any difficult or tough times that we have.
And what I found that more and more people are telling me is, and I think they're doing research into this as well, that more people are listening to classical music.
Really?
In terms of, yeah, because in terms of breaking down, you know, giving them some sense of peace, and also kind of giving them some equilibrium as well. Have you tried that?
I listen to film scores, so like a lot of like Hans Zimmer and film scores. But it makes me feel like I'm in a movie. It's calming at the same time, but I can get like really action filled. So it definitely has an effect on your mood.
And what are your thoughts on that?
I think one thing about classical music, there's no lyrics. And so you interpret it in a way that's your interpretation as opposed to somebody else's. And so when there's no lyrics, I mean, with classical music you've got different types, so if it's got a fast tempo, it naturally will increase your heart rate, so it might make you feel a bit more anxious, but if it's slower, it can calm you down. So lyrics are really powerful in sort of eliciting different types of emotion, good and bad, and so that's why when we start, if we've got young people who are anxious in the room, we'll put classical music on. And you can quite quickly see a marked difference just in how they're expressing themselves. So.
It's been an interesting year in terms of there's been far more campaigns about talking about mental health, and particularly mental health amongst men. So you did another film, didn't you, Heads Together?
Yeah, so this is so the story behind this is, so I made this video without any idea of what the subject matter or what popular topics were within the public realm. Mental health was one of them, but I was unaware of that. So I made this just for myself. But what actually happened after is Kensington Palace and Prince Harry and Charles and William, they made a huge initiative to get men and everyone to talk about mental health, and they created a Heads Together campaign. So they saw that video, and with my affiliations at Radio 1, got in touch with me to record a conversation with someone that I'm close to who was masculine and male, to talk about, you know, feelings and how you're feeling as a man and how you get through that. And this is a video that we recorded for their campaign.
So what impact did that have after that was shown? And because I know the impact when Prince Harry announced it was doing it, it made headline news, but what was the longer lasting legacy of doing that campaign?
I think it just allowed people to be more freer and talk about things that they really want to talk about. I think they had their own personal experiences about going through stuff, especially if you look back at their lives, having lost their mother at such a young age has a huge amount of dealings to deal with for a young male growing up. So I think as they got older, they understand the importance of it, and they just wanted to create a campaign where people felt free to talk about things like that. And they got loads of people, from models to presenters to actors to influencers, to just show that these conversations are absolutely fine and normal, and we want to broadcast that to the great British public.
It's interesting because I did an interview with Prince's hairdresser on Friday. She worked with him for 29 years, and she's a celebrity stylist for people like Cat Williams, and she was saying that you know, sometimes we're not that sensitive to people who work in the industry, and the kindest thing you can do is say, how are you? And it's interesting you said that as well, that even if you don't know what else to say, it doesn't have to be an artist or celebrity, but to say how are you is really quite a key thing.
And we're so British, do you know what I mean? Like, we say how are you, it's so good, it's like, yeah, me too. When that, you know, that could be a complete and utter lie, but we just don't want to have those type of conversations because everyone's busy doing exactly what they're doing. But that could really, you know, like I said in there, just flip someone's mood.
We were talking about who maybe should be equipped with more skills for dealing with well-being in terms of in the music world, because your confidant is your hairdresser often. You know, so you had some interesting thoughts on that, didn't you, about who should be trained up, particularly in terms of culturally?
I think when thinking of solutions, the focus is always on like therapists or doctors or clinicians, but actually the first people you'll speak to are the people around you, your friends, your family, your hairdresser, you go to the gym, the people you see at reception, and so they're the best people to be able to spot and provide support. And actually in our day-to-day lives, we don't always spend time in GP surgeries, and actually if you think about the process, you've got to go in a small room, sometimes without a window, and talk about your feelings on tap, and actually that doesn't happen. It happens over time. It happens with the people we trust, and we've done projects with barbers and hairdressers where we sort of train them in counselling skills so they can have conversations, because actually the biggest, I suppose, thing that stops people from helping is the fact that they might do something wrong. There's a lot of fear around doing something wrong if someone talks about their mental health, and actually the best thing you can do is listen and be able to provide support, and that support isn't always go and see your GP, because sometimes we know you'll have to wait and there's a lot of hurdles that can come through that way. So yeah, training up people in basic mental health skills, basic skills around listening and having a conversation, and think about in your lives who you would want to be there to be able to provide support, and they're the people that I feel should be trained up to provide support for people who are going through different mental health problems on a day-to-day basis.
I want to ask you, Mim, about being a man working in the music industry. How good are your male colleagues and friends at talking about how they truly feel?
No, they're terrible. They're so bad. But I kind of like that about them, because it's different to me, and let's say, hypothetically speaking, if everybody turned around in my life and started, oh, how are you feeling? It's like, yeah, it's cool, you have moments of that. These are moments in time. This is not exactly how I am all the time, mood variations from depending on what you're doing. So I like that my male friends and male colleagues are like, they talk about like manly things, or what you know what I mean?
What is a manly thing?
No, I don't know. Like football, going to the gym, stuff like that. And I think that's fine.
I think for us then, it's going to the spaces where you're having manly conversations and then giving that safe space to be able to have a conversation around what's going on for you as well. Because I think for me, I remember when I first trained as a psychological therapist, and I've got male friends, so we'd have a certain level of conversation, and it was only when I got in the therapy room and I was running men's group that I was like, wow, okay, you know what, these spaces are really important to just be honest and open, and it's really different for females and males to talk, and they communicate in very different ways, and that's one of the biggest issues around mental health and the support that's available. It's very feminine, it's very talking focused, but actually I think you need to take some of the conversations to the football or to the gym or to the spaces where men are already going, to create them safe spaces to talk and to be able to access support. Because I think, being manly is all right, but I also know the other side and the pressures of sometimes being manly and what that can do.
110%. I mean, that's why male suicide is at an all-time high within men who are coming from their 20s to their 30s. And I don't know if anyone saw the Rio Ferdinand documentary about him losing his wife and what it meant to him to now raise his kids. And this is a professional footballer who's respected and idolized by a lot of young men. Being able to open up in a way like that, I know that when people like that can do that, it allows other people to have the confidence to go and do the same thing, because they're inspired by the bravery of someone like that in that position to go and do that. So if I can do half of that, I'll be very happy.
Well, as somebody who's caring for a parent daily, what advice, or what piece of advice would you give to somebody else, like in the industry, about how to kind of keep themselves going and be motivated?
I think support network is like the #1 key thing ever. You can't do everything by yourself. You really need people that you can lean on. So I'm luckily enough in a position to have uncles and aunties and members of my family who actually take a more heightened role than I do. Like, I'm actually taking a backseat because of all the things that I have to do in my day-to-day life. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to do half the things that I really want to do within my career.
And from a person from the outside looking in, what would you say?
I think sometimes guilt and the emotion that you feel of guilt takes over, and you know, we talk about self-care but don't know what that looks like. It's sometimes having a bath, it's sometimes being able to buy some food that you like, actually being able to cook a meal for you that you want, and being able to notice those little things, and being able to list what self-care looks like for you, because carers, just by the very nature of being a carer, you're empathic. So someone else's emotions come before yours, and so over that period of time you can sometimes forget who you are, and forget what's important for you as well. So having that list of what to do and your go-to things for caring, and you know, network so other people can hold you accountable. So if they spot that you're not doing things, they can say, wait a second, take 5 minutes. It might just be 5 minutes, you know, yeah, please so.
Yeah, that's great. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, that's been a really interesting conversation. I want to pick up on something you said, Naomi, which was about training barbers and hairdressers, you know, in being able to provide training and counselling skills so they can provide support to people who come to them. But I just wonder also about parents. Now, I'm a parent of 4 sons, and obviously something like the issue about young men committing suicide is always a worry. You know, and I've known of friends who've lost sons in that way, so it's really, really tragic. So there is something in my mind about training parents, to recognize the symptoms of mental ill health. Now, it could be something quite mild, and you think, oh, well, I'll forget about that, you know, it's a one-off. But in fact, sometimes it's repeated, but you don't pay much attention to it. Yes, if somebody's running down the street naked, you know, shouting the head off, well, that's very obvious, but very often it's not. It's something very mild, but it might be building up over a period of time. So to me, there's one issue, which is about how do you train parents and maybe school friends and others to recognize some of the signs of mental ill health, and what preventative measures can you take then to nip it in the bud, as it were? Because people tell you, pull up your socks, but it's not necessarily that, it's something else that's needed. So I'd just be interested to know, you know, what sort of support you think parents should be getting, and how can they access that? And whether, in fact, you've got any points as well that you might want to suggest based on your own experience.
I think as parents, what sometimes we don't learn is about just development and the teenage brain, and actually it's developing loads at that time. So naturally, emotions are going to be up and down. So just knowing about the biology of what it's like to be a teenager. There's lots of parenting programs that are out there that sometimes shame parents into behaving in certain ways. So one, being able to spot low mood or anxiety. 2, being able to make the decision as to whether it's just part of normally being a teenager and being able to offer a safe space of support, and 3, knowing that actually probably between the ages of maybe 12 and 18 you're not going to be the primary person that your child may want to speak to about their problems. It might be their friends, it might be other people that are around their systems, which is quite hard as a parent when you've been providing care for your child for so long. So making sure that the networks that they've got around them in school or with their friends, or more increasingly on social media or on the internet, is positive for them. We do a Neurochampions training program, so we train up young people in areas like I said, the brain, neuroscience and mental health, and we're doing a parents program in Liverpool to teach the opposite side around the brain, mental health, but also social media. And understanding sort of like the links with young people and the positives and negatives of social media, because increasingly social media and online platforms like Snapchat and Instagram are your children's friends. They're spending a lot of time on those platforms and it has a big influence in their lives. So I think there's loads of resources that are available and we can maybe share them online, but creating a space for your children to be able to talk to you safely, or knowing who their friends are, so they've got friends who they can talk to.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point about knowing who their friends are. One of my cousins told me recently that his son started acting very weird. He's about 12, 13 when he came back home, and they were really trying to get to the root of the reason in the change of behaviour. And they're very in tune like that, which is very, very beneficial for them to get to the root of the problem. And they realised that he was actually being bullied in school by another child who was similar age, and basically telling his son what to do when he's in school, and that was making him very angry when they got at home. So they saw the problem, noticed the problem first, saw the problem, and then eradicated the problem by not making their child hang out with this other kid. Now, if they hadn't have noticed the problem and then changed the environment in which the child was, that could have led to You don't know what it could have led to. It could have led to consequences that you have no idea what could have happened. So the fact that they got it and eradicated it is so good. And I think the more people that are able to deploy that human ability to notice the change and action it, I think it's much better.
I also think that, I don't know if Naomi agrees, but I think you should look into what pastoral care is offered by schools, because it's sometimes schools don't offer it, and I think you need to kind of question the school, ask them why they don't, what support they offer. Manchester University is doing quite a lot of research into mental health amongst Black and Asian communities, and they've completed one 3-year programme and they're on to the next stage as well, and that is also, you can go online or speak to someone if there are small signs and you want to know how to deal with that, and they can help you as well in terms of how to approach that, or maybe who can help you, you know, from another organisation. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation, very valuable. I have worked with the community and I appreciate what you told me. My question is about the sensory stimulation that you are using, the music. Did you find the other sensories? You mentioned food. Food in itself is quite valuable in expressing love, particularly within the communities. Did you find the other stimulation, other sensory stimulation, the same value, or you prefer sound and music? Because with sound, even the noise and the sound from the nature, we can use that. Did you find the same value for other sensories?
Yes, so sound, touch. So hugs are really important, and everybody's really scared to hug nowadays. I'll say hug for 7 seconds and then it's therapeutic, and it has benefits. And it's important because a lot of the time we're not touched during the day and our body responds to touch and affection. So definitely that. Smell, you know, smell is really powerful in triggering positive and negative feelings as well. So if you've got a smell that you like, whether it's the outside, try and find a place of packaging it so you've got it in your room so you can bring it out at different points. And just knowing all your senses, you know, visual, the things that we see and we're exposed to a lot of the time. And you know, I think about my sort of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram feed. Sometimes videos come up and I can't control what's coming up, and it freaks me out and it's horrible. And so just knowing how if you see something, that will impact you as well. So I think, yes, we use all senses. We've had lavender cream, lavender smells that we'll do in some of the groups and see how people feel about it.
Also, I think art, when I was caring for my dad, he was heavily into music and food, and he thought that was all that was needed, but art was recommended for him, and it really made a huge difference. And a lot of places now actually incorporate having an artist coming in and showing them how to not only to paint, but to use mosaics and things like that. And he actually said at the time that he was very surprised at how much he enjoyed doing it.
Can I have another question?
Yeah.
Have you found the cultural differences significant in assessing psychological problem? Have you been mistaken?
It probably comes from everybody. It definitely can be mistaken, and there's certain people who are diagnosed with certain healthcare problems that they shouldn't have. So, you know, I think specifically for men and women, how they present their distress is really different. So you'll find men are often diagnosed with schizophrenia or psychosis, maybe at a point when they might be experiencing low mood and depression, and they've experienced a trauma. And we focus a lot on the diagnosis of things because of how people behave, and we don't really look at what's actually happened to someone. And so when we start to tackle like what somebody's gone through, what trauma they've experienced, how they've responded to that, as opposed to how they're behaving as a result of that, that's when we can start to see the differences. I mean, statistics will show how many people are sort of presenting with different problems. I question them, and it's probably because I do research now, so you know, I can only do it based on my personal experiences. But I think what I'd always say is, people experience things in line with the tools that they've got to cope with it. And if you haven't got the tools to cope with a problem or a challenge or a trauma, then it might not work in your favour. You might start doing things that look a bit strange or different to the people around you, and then you might be diagnosed with a mental ill health. And I think, you know, the problems are, if we don't look at what happened, then that side of things lasts the whole lifetime, and that diagnosis can last forever.
We found Joanna Hughes works at the University of Manchester. She is from the Pentecostal church, and she also asked the church to get involved in the research that they were doing, because if you go to Pentecostal church and you're singing or whatever, they also hear voices, but there's also an issue around, is that hearing voices as part of your spirituality or with mental health, and the issue where it becomes a problem is if you have a mental health problem as well. So the pastors there have actually got involved to research that more, because there are people who are sectioned because they're hearing voices for the wrong reasons, and then also people who aren't sectioned. So that's an interesting piece of research that's underway as well.
For that reason, the things you are public are got exceptional value.
You've got to.
Outside of
Yeah. Do you have anything to say on that?
I think you touched on it very well.
Okay, so I want to say thank you to Naomi. And Naomi, if people want to find out more about the services that Chinua offers, how can they find you?
Yeah, we're on Twitter, so at Chinua Health, or if anybody wants to find out about the Young People's Programme, it's called Neuro Champions, so if you Google it, you'll find out.
And Mims?
It's Mim Shaikh.
Yeah.
Shaikh is spelled S-H-A-I-K-H. I'm making a documentary BBC 3 at the moment where I'm searching for my dad. That's going to be coming out later this year, so have a look out for it. Enjoy it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much.